Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvain Rochon. I am the Paradise Engineer. Now, today in this episode, I want to talk about the economic implication of being handed out some alien technologies by an advanced civilization. And here we'd assume that is post-contact. So when the embassy is built, there's a discussion, and that it would be an exchange of information and technology. What would happen to our economy after that? Now, we've talked about this in previous episodes. It's very unlikely extraterrestrial civilizations would hand over any kind of technology whatsoever initially. But after a while, when they can see we have a healthy relationship with them, things have stabilized on a geopolitical level. There's because of the contact, mostly people have realized they're not alone, that there's bigger things at stake and so on. And we've learned lessons from the past too with nuclear and so on. They may be willing to share additional types of technologies or ideas to progress us along. So we have to talk about that first before we talk about the economic implications. So there's three broad categories of technologies that are likely we'd be very interested in, and they would, to a certain limited extent, provide us. One is on energy. Now, there's a number of different types of energies out there that we're not aware of, and some that we are aware of but cannot harness, and some that we are definitely already tapping into. And we can cut them into two different types of two categories. One is, it's very stable, very hard to turn into a weapon, like wind energy, solar energy, for example. They're low energy to a certain respect. It's very difficult to convert into a bomb or stuff like that. Whereas nuclear, of course, can be devastating if it's turned into a weapon. And that's because that form of energy is based on principles that can become unstable, especially fission. And that's how an atomic bomb is created. So they may be willing to provide us insights into how to basically stabilize our civilization by having an energy source that is free, abundant, and extremely stable, so that it's extremely difficult to convert into weaponry. Right? And that would allow us, of course, to do a lot of things, including power all of our robots, AI, data centers, everything that we're building now, to create a web of smart workers that handle auto productivity on Earth, and thus transforming the economy. So I'll get back to the economy after I tell you about the two other technologies. They're very likely going to be interested in sharing about biology. So how do you hack a body? How do you manage diseases, eliminate genetic diseases, have a very long life with full health, things like that? Having a healthy partner means less stress and less chances of trouble, especially if there's less misery. People are less prone to be controlled by megalomaniacs, dictators, and so on, if there is some kind of security in people's health. So that's a definite. And that would be a great thing in the economy as well, because it means that people remain capable of contributing for way longer, healthier, and there's way less burden on the healthcare system if people are all healthy. Now, the third part would be on communications. If we have a lot of energy, or the new energy we just talked about, then we'd be able to travel through the solar system pretty quickly. So we need better communication systems to travel distances in a shorter amount of time, so they can help us figure that out, because we don't know how to do anything that's beyond the speed of light regarding communication, although we have ideas leveraging quantum entanglement. It's already experimental right now. They'll be able to help us out and create a way to communicate. And communication is a pathway to peace and cooperation and collaboration. So that's very positive and advantageous for them, for us to have a good way to communicate. And communication itself can be weaponized, but the technology, the underlying technology of transferring information is quite benign, right? So that could be very interesting. Now, if you have these three things, that means you have ways to have way more powerful artificial intelligence, a healthy population, and have robots and AI that essentially take over all the GDP production, which creates a society that doesn't need to work for a living anymore. At least we can restructure the economy that way. And which is very, very likely how they operate. Like if they are at least a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, which means they are able to harness the total power of an entire planet at the very least, or maybe a type 2, which they harness the total power of a sun, and so on and so on. If you go down the path of Kardashev scaling, they have a society where labor is most likely not a way to show that you're valuable enough to live, because you have machines that are able to do that way better than individuals. And we're on the cusp of doing that ourselves. But with the arrival of ETs and the sharing of some technologies, just these simple technologies, it would leap us forward about 100 years, where we are really at the stage of the Federation from Star Trek, for example, where people what they do is where their contribution is based on passion, not on need. They don't work for a living; they live for their hobbies and families and contribution value in other ways, in the human ways, not in production ways. So that's the dream, really. And we're on the path of doing that ourselves. But since the embassy should be built in a few years from now, in about 5 years, perhaps we'd open the doors if everything continues to go well. We're going to have contact soon after, or maybe before that. We're lucky. We'll accelerate that potential new world for ourselves. And so the economic impact, after I told you all this, is transformation. It's not an increase. Of course, there's increase in productivity. There's increase in decreases in waste, environmental support and rejuvenation through all this process, because we can have AI become a caretaker of the planet and the animals. We don't need to have animals in the farms anymore, because we can cultivate the meats we want in manufacturing using cells and genetic engineering versus raising actual animals and slaughtering them. We can repatriate the whole planet, make sure that everything is recycled properly, because we don't have human beings messing things up and being wasteful. We have machines that are able to do that way better and more effectively. And everybody can be fed, everybody has a roof, and the materials are being used in a smart way across the globe. So that's a new economy where people are, all this productivity is not on the back of people, but on the backs of technology with infinite energy basically backing it up. And they are self-replicating, self-adaptive, and improving constantly, so that they're always inching towards additional perfection of satisfying our needs and taking care of balance basically on the planet. And this is if we play our cards right, and our friends from the stars would be able to support and help us with their experience and their knowledge in guiding us through that process of transition towards that type of economy. And that's all beneficial for everybody. That's why I call myself a paradise engineer. In fact, that's why I published my book in 2018, Engineering Paradise. Well, that's the idea, is we can create a world that is better, redesign the economy, redesign political systems, redesign social systems, and so on, for everybody's advantage, including the planet Earth. So that's the idea. I'd like to hear your comments if you have any, and we can do another chat later. Have a good one.